This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. Thanks for listening. I am Billy Embody. We've got a lot to get to today, including breaking down position by position what we learned from fall camp. So a lot to get to overall about tons of players across the board for the Mustangs. And so we'll have plenty to talk about. But first, we are presented by our friends at StatusJet. StatusJet.com. Reach out to David Henry and his entire team to get you from point A to point B, whether it be a family trip, a work trip, but most importantly, an SMU game day with an incredible level of luxury that you'd expect. And week 0 is just a week and 2 days away for SMU fans. And that means getting out to Reno, maybe do a little Lake Tahoe, however you want to plan your trip. StatusJet can help. Use code PonyUpACC to get a discount on a round trip flight. Just have the conversation with them. That's what I tell people. We had, I believe, 4 On the Pony Express subscribers in the last month. Just have the conversation with David Henry and his team. They'll explain to you the costs, what it can look like, all of those things for you, and you'll get a better understanding of what flying like this could really look like for you, your family, your friends, your work colleagues, all of those things. So reach out to Status today. We appreciate StatusJet and all they do for On the Pony Express, as well as them being proud supporters of SMU athletics. As we dive into what is now the end of fall camp, it is over. They are into game prep for Nevada. On Thursday, they were doing their mock game. The guys will get maybe a little bit of a reset this weekend, and then they'll get into a full game week before traveling out next Friday to Nevada for that season opener for week 0. Before we talk about takeaways position by position and player by player, I want to give a special shout out to the 1911 group. And this is a group that I came across last month, I want to say, and they have burst onto the scene. Mitch Brown and what they're putting together is really special. It's a networking group for SMU alums in the area. It's not associated with SMU or anything like that, but the membership is free if you're approved, and they have great events. Just today, got done with lunch at the Dallas Country Club where Lance McElhaney, Jared Romo, Garrett Gilbert, and my quarterback when I was at SMU on the team for a year, Kyle Padron, were led through a panel discussion with Rich Phillips, the play-by-play, and we had a nice lunch at DCC. Saw a ton of familiar faces, including some On the Pony Express listeners, as well as ontheponyexpress.com subscribers. So I just want to give them a special shout out. Appreciate all they're doing. It was an awesome event. So go to 1911gp.com and just look at their events. They've got a directory. It's a great opportunity for people to network in the Dallas area in particular, and just had a great time today. So it was a nice little Thursday getting over to DCC for a little lunch, for a little SMU football, and just was thrilled to be there. It was great. So check out the 1911 group. Now, SMU fall camp has come and gone. They started 2 days after ACC Media Day for SMU, and before you know it, we blinked and it's over. Game week begins on Sunday, I guess. We can say that that's probably the official start. Rhett Lashley's radio show is next Wednesday. We're in the full swing very quickly here, or will be here soon, for football season, which is exciting. But for fall camp, it was I think a really interesting fall camp from the standpoint of you knew a lot of the faces. Last year, it was, wow, this entire defense is new. We'd seen a lot of the guys in the spring, don't get me wrong, but there was a lot that was unknown. And this year, I feel like going into fall camp, we have a better understanding of where this team is from a personnel perspective and where they need to go to be successful this year in the ACC, which is a different conversation in terms of talking about the season and putting together what SMU has to put together to be successful, which is why I'm going to try my best. And if you listened to the podcast earlier this week, it did kind of not spiral, but change into just a much longer discussion about the season and all of those things. But SMU has a really strong roster is one of the things that I learned through fall camp. And that isn't to say that was a question that I had. I felt that way going into it. I did feel like there were questions that needed to be answered, but we're going to go position by position here. And I'm going to try to hit on all 85. Now, to lay the groundwork for you guys on this, we got around 6 periods of fall camp practice viewing periods each practice. We were allowed it every single practice, which was great. Outside of the scrimmage last weekend, it was closed. Technically, the former player barbecue was then, and they had it in the stadium. But in general, we got a glimpse of SMU every day. And then, of course, you talk to sources, you talk to coaches, you get a better feel for this team. So I'm going to try to put all of that together and talk about it on this podcast, position by position. And of course, for our ontheponyexpress.com subscribers, we're going to have all of our takeaways and we're going to go through them kind of, again, position by position. We'll have it in the written form. We'll also break down the transfers in particular and maybe what their stock is looking like heading into the season. But I'm going to try to keep this as on topic of what did we learn about a player in a position overall versus, well, here's all the things that can happen this season and all those types of things. So let's start at the top, quarterback. And this is an interesting position from the standpoint of when we talked with Casey Woods on Wednesday, I did not expect the discussion with him to turn into what ended up being a major talking point and probably out of fall camp, the most important quote that might have been thrown out there over the course of the entire fall camp. And I asked him, I said, how do you handle keeping Preston Stone, Kevin Jennings happy? How, what's the plan for them? And where do you go going into the season? And he talked a lot about, how well they've handled the competition and how well they've been able to be good teammates, and they have complete trust in them to run the offense, and there's not going to be a drop off and all of those things. And then the follow-up was, well, do you see them there being do you know who's going to take the first snap against the Wolfpack? And he said, no, quote, no, I don't think so. I think there's ongoing conversation as there has been since January, right? I think we've got a good mindset about, hey, we want to evaluate this thing all the way to the end and let those guys compete and separate themselves in the places where they could or couldn't. Fortunately, we've got 2 proven winners that are really good, strong men, and they believe in themselves. They believe in this team, and we're going to execute at a high level either way. And I think that quote is important. And there's a lot more. You can watch it on our YouTube channel as far as the full video and his comments. There's also the story at ontheponyexpress.com with his full comments. But I think the big thing that you could take away from it is they really trust these 2 quarterbacks, and they're not going to settle for average quarterback play this year. And this is what I learned about the quarterback position. The biggest takeaway is they're not going to settle for, all right, this is a learning time. SMU is moving up into the ACC. This is a learning time for these quarterbacks. And quite frankly, you can apply this to the entire team because there is too much talent. And I said this earlier this week. There's too much talent on this team. There's too much just overall depth that you can't be held back trying to learn. And everyone is going to have to raise their level of play. That's been their offseason mantra, is raise it. And for the quarterbacks, they have to do that when the games come on. And in particular, when he says in places that they could or couldn't, that might involve this thing going into the season where SMU opens at Nevada. Preston Stone could play. Kevin Jennings could play. They could both see time. They also have what should be a layup against Houston Christian the next week. They have BYU the week after, a team that missed a bowl game. I believe they missed a bowl game. And so you're going to have a 3-week stretch where you have a chance to truly evaluate this thing. And it isn't going to be something where, hey, we're evaluating this thing and we know we might have to take some lumps because there's a first-year player in terms of a starter like Preston was last year. SMU was patient, and it paid off with Preston Stone through those first 6 games. He got in the back half of the schedule. He was playing really well, played well in the second half against Memphis, was obviously cooking against Navy, led the offense to some wins over some poor competition, and got it rolling. Now, this team, the way they've assembled it and the experience they have, they believe they have a team that can make noise in the ACC. And the quarterback position this year is not going to be one that has a short leash. It's not going to be one, though, that is allowed to, in my opinion, struggle as maybe much as it did last year, because there was this kind of understanding that Preston won the job. He's going to get his opportunity, and we're going to see how it goes. And until we're forced to really make a decision and go elsewhere with it, Preston's got the reins. This year, I don't think that's the case. Preston has done plenty in fall camp. He's looked the part. He's done better at checking down the football. He's been able to push the ball down the field. I think that's a credit to what we'll talk about in a bit with the wide receivers being a little bit more seasoned with both quarterbacks. And Preston has had a really good fall camp from what I've seen. The reality, too, though, when evaluating these guys, is the defensive line is so good, it's hard to get a good read on how these guys are going to play when the bullets are flying against other teams, because as I'll share when we talk about the defensive line, I believe that defensive line that SMU has is probably better than 9 of the 12, just kind of off the top of my head, defensive lines that SMU's offensive line will face over the course of the season. So kind of think about it in that perspective when we talk about how good this defensive line is, how maybe the offensive line has struggled handling them. But as far as the quarterbacks, to evaluate this position, and this is where this whole thing turned into an insane 5-page thread on our board, which quarterback is a hot button discussion. But we've said that Preston and Kevin are competing, and they've been competing this offseason, and especially once Preston got back healthy. What that means is not there is an end with the first snap of the Nevada game, because they're now at a point in their careers and what they've both done on the field where they have earned the coach's trusts. And you can, if you want to believe coach speak, like that was coach speak with Casey Woods saying, we're going to operate at a high level anyway, and things like that, with who, regardless of who's in there, that's fine. They do believe that, though. And for Kevin, he has shown some ability to make some plays and some throws that arm strength wise, Preston maybe doesn't necessarily have. But Preston also in his own right, as we know, can make plays, can create and do things. And that's where later Casey says, we're not having Preston try to be Kevin, and Kevin's not trying to be Preston. They need to be their own people and their own players. And that's why I think this quarterback competition works so well. They couldn't be more different in terms of how they came to be at SMU. And they couldn't be really more different in terms of where they're at in kind of their careers so far in college either. And that's what makes this intriguing, because SMU staff knows that they have Preston, who has played a ton of football from high school to now at SMU and was coming on strong at the end of last year and really showed improvement and has had a very good fall camp. And then they also have Kevin, who can, quite frankly, run around, make a little bit more plays than Preston can. Preston can extend. Kevin can maybe run a little bit more than Preston can. And you can also see it in his arm strength that he's got a little bit of a gun, and he's got a little bit of a gunslinger mentality. If there's something that Preston does differently than Kevin, it's that yes, you want him to check it down instead of extending and making plays, but also Preston early on last year wasn't pushing the ball down the field as much as he should have. And we kind of talked about that and how inconsistent the downfield passing game was for SMU at times early in the year. It was, it was pretty wild. And so to look at this competition, you don't look at it as they need to have an answer and they need to be done. And this is, can't believe we're having this discussion. It's a credit to both guys, quite frankly. Like Preston ended last season on a bad note with getting hurt, and I feel for him because I would have loved to have seen him in the Tulane game, and I would have loved to see him and how the bowl game would have gone. But Kevin got an opportunity and led SMU, interceptions and all, to a championship win over a Tulane team that hadn't won it or hadn't lost at home in like 3 years. And there's kudos that are deserved for that. And the coaches see something in Kevin as well. And whenever you talk about quarterbacks, so much of the time it has to be, oh, you're on X player's side or Y player's side. That doesn't need to be the case here. And that's what I learned about this competition is that they really do both buy into the team aspect. And they're both excited when they make plays. And they're both, they were great together when they went to ACC Media Days together, mind you. And think about all the leaders on this team that could have gone in, and I'm just going to say Kevin's place because Preston is the returning quarterback. He's on all the preseason watch lists and all of those things. But there are other guys that could have gone in Kevin's place, but Brett Lashley's words, deserved to go. They got Kevin to this season. The whole idea that, SMU needed to bring him to keep him and help, do this or do that for him. Like, no, like Kevin is back. They will have some sort of either decision or storyline when this season ends around one of these two quarterbacks because they're both getting into the back end of their careers and SMU is going to have to make a decision most likely. So this season will play out however it plays out. But in fall camp, these two guys showed their maturity. They showed their competitiveness, and they both made plays amid kind of tough circumstances with the injuries to the offensive line and having to go through that in team period. But when you get a chance to watch them every now and again in 7-on-7, you can see why SMU might want this thing to play out into the season potentially. And that's also confidence in the team that SMU has, if you want to read even further into it. You look at last year, and there were moments like, think about this. SMU rotated Brandon Crosley and CJ Sanders. CJ obviously grabbed the nickel job and really held on to it. But SMU was so good defensively, they sat back and said, let's just redshirt Brandon Crosley so he can come back. That's where SMU's at with the rest of this team when trying to decide how to handle the quarterbacks. They feel like they can play both. They feel like they can get a little bit more information on both. And that's a good problem to have. So, 18 minutes in already. But I learned that those two are handling the competition well. They both can lead this offense and direct it the right way. Just remember that whenever Preston's in, whenever Kevin's in, it looks very different. Last year, SMU took out a lot of the RPO, slow developing things that, in my opinion, kind of plagued Preston, added another situation that he needed to deal with. And it's not from a processing standpoint. It's from a comfort level in the offense and what you're trying to do. Like, let Preston drop back and just go. That's kind of what he can really do. Kevin does a really nice job in the RPO. He's got the threat of being a true runner a little bit more in the ground game. We saw that in the Tulane game a little bit, just his ability to extend plays and run. And I think that's something that is different when he's in there. And so just kind of keep that in mind. SMU has two really good quarterbacks, and they also have a guy to transition finally out of those two. Keldrick Luster had a really strong fall camp. He was one of the guys that really stepped up. And however you want to look at it from, well, he's going against the third team, or doing this, doing that. I tell you what, he might have the strongest arm out of the three main guys that a kid could in theory, play for SMU this year. Tyler Aaronson's going to redshirt in all likelihood, unless there's a ton of injuries. And SMU will continue to develop him. He showed some improvement, I thought, from spring to fall camp, a little bit more comfortable in what they're doing and how they're, what they're asking him to do. Keldrick, though, took the biggest jump out of maybe all three quarterbacks. And that makes sense, right? You have your first college season and your head swimming. You get a little bit of an opportunity to get in there and play and get your feet wet, I think, against Prairie View. And then you fast forward and your season's over. Well, what do you need to do? You need to get back to work. And that's what Keldrick does really well. So he's got a big arm, made a lot of plays in fall. And he really, when people were talking about the quarterbacks and all the coaches and interviews and things like that, Keldrick Lester came up a bunch from a lot of these coaches and players. So credit gets thrown his way, rightfully so, for the fall camp that he had. But he showed a big arm and just a much better understanding of the offense and what they're trying to do as well, which you would expect going into your second year. So with that, we'll get into the rest of the team now. But first, I do want to remind you guys about our friends at AKM Turf and Greens. Go to akmturfandgreens.com. Use code PONYUP for $500 off your lawn project. Whether it's a big lawn, whether it's a chipping green, putting green, you can turn your backyard into just kind of an average space into an electric putting and chipping area for you, your family, and your friends and your kids to enjoy. They can also just lay down rock and use that code PONYUP for $500 off your project. Email info@akmturfandgreens.com. Alex Carpenter and his team will take care of you and make your backyard incredible paradise just in time for football season too. So give them a call today. Had an On the Pony Express subscriber come away incredibly impressed, and some other people are already reaching out about it as well. So check them out. All right, let's jump into the rest of the team here, and I promise there's nuance to quarterbacks, guys. As one, I can promise you there's nuance to it. But we'll jump in here to the running back room, and Jalen Knighton and LJ Johnson, quite frankly, we didn't see much of in fall camp, in a sense that when we're allowed in as reporters, they saw some time here and there. They kind of switched off being the first team running backs during the tempo period, which shows you where they stand on the depth chart, no question, but also that they've earned a lot more trust. And I think that's one of the other things that I learned in fall camp about this team is this coaching staff, and Casey Woods had a really good answer to this. You can't be dumb tough in fall camp where you get a bunch of guys hurt and all of a sudden you're going from a team that they feel like they can challenge in the ACC and make some noise early on to all of a sudden being down and out because you've beat up your guys, you've gotten guys hurt, they're out for the year. And I think Jalen Knighton and LJ Johnson between themselves need to be more consistent on the field this fall. But what SMU can't have is them getting hurt and then not being ready to go. And if my football memory serves me right on this, I think Jalen Knighton got hurt right before the season. I could be wrong on that. And maybe he got nicked up and it was kind of something that we were watching really closely early in the season. I could be off on that. LJ Johnson also got nicked up later in the season, and they just battled consistency issues. So they're a group that LJ has shown the ability to flash with power, flash with speed. Jalen Knighton has that smoothness, that vision, that explosiveness. He can catch the football a little bit. All of those things can factor in. Those are your 1A, 1B. But the biggest change outside of Kamar Wheaton being hurt, and he's out for a bit. We'll just leave it at that. Rhett Lashley hasn't been able to formally address it yet, but he's out for a bit. Brashard Smith coming into fall camp looking ready to go physically and then stepping up into that role really well from a running back perspective. This is a guy that was fourth nationally in kickoff return average for last season across the country. And SMU brought him in as, hey, we need to upgrade our kick return game. Let's bring him in, and maybe he can play a little bit of running back for us as well. And sure enough, he's come in, looked the part physically, And you're going to see him be used in, I think, special teams, of course, with the return game, but also being a running back. He's got a little bit more of um, an explosiveness that SMU hasn't had since Ulysses Bentley, quite frankly. And so if he hits, he's probably one of those players that if you look at, if he hits for SMU this year, one, what an incredible late addition by Kyle Cooper, running backs coach and special teams coordinator. Basically, he didn't have to convince Rhett Lashley, but at the time, they were pretty tight on roster spots. And Coop kind of pushed and, said, hey, I think we should go for this. And so sure enough, they did. And I if it pays off, it's going to be one of those great last additions to this team, like a Kobe Wilson was last year for the defense. SMU has a decent group of running backs. Derek McFall looks like he's going to be a star at some point for SMU, but he's still just a true freshman. But Brashard Smith has that true elite level talent that, again, if it hits, look out. This offense just added a big piece of explosion. And in the kick return game, if those issues can be alleviated, man, SMU is going to be dangerous for the first time in a minute on special teams with him back there. So that's kind of the running back group. I think they're just going to try to find the hot hand early in the season and go from there. The wide receivers. This is one of our message board's favorite discussions. If you're not at ontheponyexpress.com, use code SMU1. That's SMU the number 1 for 2 months for just $1. Gets you into the season, gets you into ACC play at this point. So jump on board with us and get on the message board. It's the number 1 message board for SMU fans. Chat it up during games, recruiting, what have you. And we can chat on there as well. But the wide receiver group, Jordan Curley moves on, and they now have 6 guys coming back that they really feel like they trust. So with that is the question of, are they going to rotate? What's that going to look like? And at least this year, I will say, there's kind of an odd number in a sense. When Jordan Curley got hurt last year, I believe they moved Jordan Hudson over to start learning his position, or they made some change midseason there. And for this foursome of Moochie Dixon, Romello Brinson, Keyshawn Smith, and Jordan Hudson, it's put up or shut up, but they all have their own ways in fall camp of standing out. And last year, I felt like, all right, Keyshawn is inconsistent, drops the ball a little bit too much. That was something that was talked about coming over from Miami. Romello, as bouncy and as athletic as he is, he has stick figures for legs, and he needs a weight room and just kind of mature a little bit more. Jordan Hudson came in late, wasn't here in the spring, and was needing to learn the offense, develop a little bit more, find that maturity. Not that he was immature, he just wasn't as just like fully like in it. Like he's whenever I'd pop down to campus this summer, I saw Jordan Hudson working out in the indoor, and he was working out with trainers. He was working out with, this guy's, that guy's, like in it. And all these guys are, I mean, they all spend so much time on this craft, but Jordan Hudson really has gotten into his bag, so to speak, in terms of using all the tools that he has, both to improve and get better. And just from a talent perspective, he's raised his level of game from what I've been able to see. His competitiveness when the ball's in the air, just what he's able to do as far as setting up corners. He's an issue, is what I saw in fall camp. Romello has now taken the step from being that bouncy athletic guy to really being a ball winner. And that's going to be something to watch, is if he turns that into being a ball winner on the field in the fall in a couple weeks, that's going to be really special. And then Moochie, to back up to him, Moochie is the fastest guy on the team, period. That's it. If you ask just about any player who's maybe not involved in that conversation of I am the fastest, Moochie is the guy that they pick out. Now, the other one is Jalen Davis Robinson, and rightfully so, one of the fastest guys to be on the team, and what he did at Waxahachie running track. But you look at Moochie Dixon and he just rolls. And he kind of looks like a sprinter in a way. Like if he trained, if he trained for it, he would look a little bit differently physically, but he's super veiny, very, very athletic. And last year he had that finger injury, which really he just couldn't catch the ball with it. And this year he's really developed that top end speed and being able to go get it. And that is something between him and Keyshawn. I think they're both on the same side from what it seems like. Jordan and Romello kind of both on the same side from what it seems like. Those guys can now go and they can rotate back and forth. I think that is going to help this downfield passing game. Jordan Hudson's intermediate and short route running has really improved. I think Keyshawn's more willing to go over the middle. Romello's willing to go over the middle. You've got to see it turn on when it comes to on the field and putting it together for these guys. But, when you have these receivers and they have put so much into being more physical, being physically ready to go, it can make a difference. And so I'm very intrigued to see how this receiving group looks when the lights actually come on. Who is going to be consistent? Will it be Jordan Hudson? Will Romello take what he's done and turn it into a terrific season? Will Moochie be able to take the top off of defenses like he can in SMU practice? Those are all questions. These are going to be answered quickly because Nevada does have enough talent to obviously give SMU a little bit of a run for its money. It's not going to be something where it is a layup, so to speak. And SMU's favored by 25, but still, they're going to be at least athletic enough to make SMU earn it. There's no question about that. In the slot, Jake Bailey and Roderick Daniels. The only takeaway I have really on Roderick Daniels is with Kamar Wheaton's injury, could we see Roderick end up getting a couple more snaps in the running back room? Because quite frankly, whenever he's been back there for SMU, good things have happened. So I don't know if maybe they'll toy with that a little bit more, but who knows? Maybe. Jake Bailey really looks pretty good. Again, guys, we're only in there for so much, and I am intrigued to see how SMU walks this line of, all right, 6 receivers we really trust. RJ Maryland, really, really, really good tight end. Matthew Hibner, they really like as well. How do we get those guys to all figure it out and be productive? And that's one of the takeaways that I will point to with this team. They just want to win. The culture is there for that. It's really quite something. And until you go out at practice and you really see how they work and you get that extended look at them, it's tough to understand. Everybody always says, yeah, they're happy. But last year's team, they really showed it. They were able to put aside their ideas of being starters and this and that. They won a championship. And so it's proven. Where the wide receiver and tight end room has to factor in together is SMU had one tight end that it trusted last year, and that was RJ Maryland. This year, they have Matthew Hibner, a national champion. He is an old man in a sense in that tight end room and athletic and can block. Do you run a little bit more 12 personnel, and all of a sudden you're looking at a team that is not only having to rotate all these different positions and things like that, but you're having to just be so versatile because you have the opportunity to be, and you have the personnel to be. That's the big thing that is going to be interesting as this tight end room emerges. And so with that tight end room, RJ Maryland is an absolute stud. He's up to 240-ish now, at least entering fall camp. They're really excited about what he's going to bring to the table for this offense. They feel like this is his money year. And if he shines like they think he can, then he's going to have a decision to make. And he's got an opportunity to make a lot of money on Sundays. But Matthew Hibner has come in and pushed him. He's not going to overtake him. There's no change in the starter at tight end. There's no question there. Adam Moore has done a lot of good things over the course of fall camp, and there's going to be a natural competition there with those guys to earn snaps and continue to see the field just overall. And so blocking will be the biggest area that RJ has to continue to step up with and see if he can take that to the next level, because that is such a big part. I mean, that's what makes Roderick Daniels one of the best overall players on the team, because of his commitment to do all the things that they want him to do. Like, you can go back to Roderick's either freshman year or maybe, I guess it would have been freshman year, and he hits 21.5 miles an hour on that, short pass that he takes to the house for a touchdown against North Texas. But oh, by the way, he is blocking his absolute tail off to help a guy score, and he does that day in, day out. And so they just have a lot of guys that are committed to doing the little things. But the biggest thing that needs to happen from fall camp to the season is I think you need an alpha to emerge at wide receiver. I don't know like many teams that are really good offensively that roll the receivers like SMU's done. And I think at UConn, it was somebody mentioned to me that Rhett had a lot of different receivers catch passes and yards, and they improved a lot in that 1 year he was at UConn. But when you have athletes like a Jordan Hudson, Romello Brinson, Keyshawn Smith, Moochie Dixon, Jake Bailey, Roderick Daniels, I don't know. You want one to be that complete alpha and go be an all ACC receiver. And I think that changes the way teams can prepare for you. If you have an opposing defense that is going to say, okay, they're going to rotate receivers, that's their prerogative, but you're not necessarily going to have to bracket a Jordan Hudson or bracket a Romello Brinson. That means that one, they don't respect your receivers, or they're very worried about you running the football, or they're really worried about RJ Maryland, whatever. And RJ does draw a lot of attention that allows one-on-one coverage. But SMU needs one of these guys to emerge as an alpha. I've seen them win enough one-on-one balls. I've seen them be competitive as all get out, in particular Romello and Jordan Hudson. But you need them to do it in a game. And so for fall camp, what I learned about these receivers, I think they took the next step in their development, but it's got to translate onto the field in a tougher conference. And so it's still an unknown. For the younger receivers, Jackson Lavender, Jamarian Carroll, Ashton Cozart, Randy Reese. Couple quick thoughts. Jackson Lavender continuing to be, quintessential like coach's son. And in terms of his work ethic and what he does day in, day out in practice, he works his tail out. He continues to develop his game. And Ashton Cozart, the Oregon transfer, has come in. And I felt like he was nicked up earlier in fall camp. And that kind of, held him back a little bit. But he's come on strong the last week with a couple of really nice catches on deep balls and things like that to make some big plays. Jamarian Carroll, out of kind of guys who maybe aren't household names yet, he probably had the best close of maybe any offensive player. He had a strong scrimmage on Saturday. He looks like he's running around really well. He's playing his way into being a strong option next year when SMU loses 5 receivers, potentially 6. And then Randy Reese has come in and shown a lot of explosiveness. He looks the part running around there now that he's healthy after gray shirting. So Trip Reardon, another big body. He's going to play on special teams. He's done some good things as well. So Stone Eby, another football guy, really, for the brand, so to speak. And he'll be in there at times as an H-back in a heavy set, I would imagine, for SMU when they need a lot of meat out there. When you get to the offensive line, this is a group that I think if they were completely healthy, we would be feeling a little differently about them right now. But you get to fall camp, and I kind of felt like it was going to be a group that would be fairly settled as far as, look, Logan Parr was still coming back from shoulder injury. Ben Sparks, you see out there if you're watching on YouTube, coming back from his own shoulder, but was a little bit ahead of Logan. And the question was going to be, okay, Savion Byrd battling Andrew Chamblee at right tackle. How's that going to go? Well, Andrew Chamblee goes down like day 3 of fall camp and has been out for a while now. Savion Byrd, okay, this is your time. You're going to step up. Well, it wasn't working, and they made a change and went with Nate Anderson at right tackle, and he's been serviceable. He's fairly athletic. I think laterally in pass protection, you want to see a little bit better from him at times, but between him and Caleb Johnson, they've been battling it out for a while now in fall camp. And, it's going to be Nate Anderson when they start that season opener, I would imagine. I don't think Andrew Chamblee will be back for that game, and they're going to have to weather that storm. And if that storm is bad, then they'll have to get really creative. And that would mean probably, if I'm guessing, Ja'Kai Clark, who's going to start at right guard, would move to center. Justin Osborne would kick out if it's really bad. If they can weather it, they'll be okay, because they know at some point Andrew Chamblee, the all-SEC freshman from Arkansas, is going to come back. So if you run down this group, Justin Osborne has looked incredible at center. I mean, he was on the Remington Award watch list. He's got an opportunity to really boost his draft stock this year. Graham Uter has come in behind Justin Osborne and taken a lot of snaps at center and been terrific. Needs to continue to work on his snaps. I believe he had to play right or left tackle as a senior for his high school. And then at some point he switched to center too. He's been all over the place. But he's settling in. They view him as the center of the future without a doubt. Ja'Kai Clark's been at right guard. He's been holding that down. Ben Sparks has come back and also pushed him. Darren Justice shouted him out earlier this week. And then left guard, they moved Savion Byrd back to his spot where he played at Oklahoma. And he looks a lot better for that. And that helps because it probably alleviates concerns of, oh, we need Logan Parr back. We need Logan Parr back. We need Logan Parr back. Well, now you have a guy that's played a bunch. He never broke through and was a lead at Oklahoma, but he's played a bunch. He's got experience there. They're going to be able to make it work because he does have that amount of just experience, and he just looks more comfortable there. It's very apparent that that's the case. So then you have PJ Williams, who's probably been the best offensive lineman in fall camp. And he's just looks, I don't want to say night and day from fall camp or from the spring, but it's pretty close. He's been outstanding and has been dominant at times in one-on-ones and has really been able to control the line of scrimmage at that left tackle spot. So that's kind of where the starting group stands. And then you get into, okay, Caleb Johnson, the former Notre Dame transfer, is kind of your swing tackle at this stage with Andrew Chamblee still out. And if not him, then they'll get creative. But also King Large has worked at offensive tackle. And then I believe Kayshawn Sapp a little bit, but he's also been a guard. And so then you have Alex Woods, who with Graham Uter stepping in at center and being so good, he's been put back at guard. And that's a great spot for him. He can really add some size there. I think he'll work out really well in the future. If you're looking kind of way ahead to next year, I could see a very early starting lineup of PJ Williams at left tackle, Logan Parr at left guard. It would probably be, probably Graham Uter at center. That's how high they are on him. And then you would have Alex Woods at right guard, is my guess. And then you would have Andrew Chamblee at right tackle. That's just way too early 2025 starting offensive line for SMU. But they brought in Paris Patterson and Kayshawn Sapp as kind of reserve guys. And I would say that right now those two look like they have a lot of development to do. They'll add some depth. They were Power 5 transfers. In a way, Kayshawn Sapp went FSU to ECU and then left and went to SMU. So those guys will provide some depth. And, the offensive line, I think, as a quick takeaway as a group, they're going to be more athletic than they were last year. and you return Logan Parr, so net. Kai Clark is in better shape and ready to go at right guard. And he's kind of a fire hydrant. He's physical. He's played 40 plus starts at Miami. And once they get Chamblee back, they're going to be more athletic at right tackle. And I mean, I liked Tyron White a lot. He was very, very good. But Chamblee kind of looks the part, just a little bit shorter, but still a massive human. And then at center, you're far more athletic at there with Justin Osborne than Branson Hickman. And I like Branson coming out of high school. I like Branson, what he did for SMU. I defended him a lot during times where he, just took some lumps being a smaller guy. But J.O. is much stronger. He can run. He can move around. I think SMU's inside run game should take a considerable step up this year. And again, remember, they're playing a very good defensive front, but they should be able to make some serious inroads running the football up the middle because they have, I think, a more athletic, experienced, physical interior of their line than maybe they did last year. And so this will be quite the year to see if SMU can make those moves running the football. Something they have been good and bad at times is running along the interior. And then left tackle, as far as the backups, King Large is probably in there as well. They like him. So with that, the overall offensive line, though, they should be better along the interior, just run blocking in particular. And then left tackle, I think you're more well-rounded with PJ Williams versus Marcus Bryant, who was an excellent pass protector, just wasn't as good in the run game. PJ has really stepped up and seems like he's going to round that out very well. So the offensive line, we'll see. Bullets start flying. We'll see how much pressure they allow to see if they can hold it down, all those things. But it was clear SMU is ready to make some moves overall and kind of make some changes to that group as they let two veteran multi-year starters walk out the door in the end. So quite the move there. And we'll be obviously keeping a close eye on that group as the season gets going. So with this defensive line, I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think I talked about it for 15 minutes on the podcast on Tuesday. But again, going to rapid fire here as far as what we learned about some of these players. And Elijah Roberts, I think, is going to be an all ACC guy. I think enough said on that. He can bend. He's athletic. He's a leader. He wants to be dominant. He wants to be a first-round draft pick. And he, when he's on, plays like it. So that's it. That's the Elijah Roberts. I'm just not going to get into too much more. I'm interested to see how they move him around. And we knew he was going to be good in fall camp, and he was that. Opposite of him, Jafari Harvey comes in from Miami, and he's going to play a lot. He's a bigger bandit than maybe SMU's used to. Having a guy like Nelson Paul, who's more of a speed edge rusher, having Isaiah Smith when he was a little smaller in terms of mass last year. And they bring in Jafari, and he's a big, strong, I think 6-year or 5th-year player who's started multiple seasons for Miami. And then Isaiah Smith comes in and puts on 30 pounds or so, and he looks like a grown man. I said this before, Isaiah Smith's stepped up in camp. And when I did a story for On the Pony Express, and I said, here are the players I feel like have stepped up in fall camp, I didn't put Turbo on there. But the reason why I feel like I didn't put Turbo on there is, one, I was really trying to limit it to, I think I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I actually did 7 for defense, which is good. But I didn't want to go to 8. Like I don't know. I was trying to draw the line. It doesn't mean other people that haven't stepped up or whatever. But I also have been so high on Isaiah Smith since he got to campus that he just has continued to develop and do the things that I thought he was going to do. Like, I think he's got a chance to have an explosive, I have arrived, know my name type of story this season for SMU, and helping him and Jafari Harvey play off each other, I think, is a huge deal. Those two guys both have the ability to be weapons for SMU rushing the passer. Then you have Cam Robertson, who's backing up Elijah Roberts, who's physical, can play some quality snaps, has the athleticism I think that you want at the defensive end spot. He's a little thicker than Jalen Samuels was for SMU as well, so that helps in the run game. And that'll help Elijah Roberts rotate out a little bit, so maybe he's not as gassed at times during the course of a game. Then you have a lot of depth. David Abiara, Omari Abor, Braden Flowers once he's fully back healthy again from his knee injury, and Billy Walton, the Texas transfer, all look to provide good depth. That's I'm going to leave it there. Billy Walton looks like he's going to be a real big player for SMU next year. David Abiara and Omari Abor have really bought into what Calvin Thibodeau wants for them. I don't know if it'll pan out into a ton of snaps, but we'll see. Along the interior, look, you can't go wrong. Here's Tank Booker and Jonathan Jefferson are going to hold down the nose tackle spot with Blake Burris helping out there, the Texas Tech transfer. Then you're going to have Jared Harrison Hunt. You're going to have Mike Lockhart. You're going to have Corey Roberson. And then the interesting thing is Mike Johan Sanjo Njiki got hurt. And that was unfortunate for SMU. So he's been out for a little bit, actually. And quite honestly, they're so deep at defensive tackle, I might have forgotten about mentioning that in a practice report now that I think about it. But they've been able to take a look at this group and really put the guys in the right position to succeed here. And that's something that I think SMU's going to be able to really help themselves with, is having this depth along the interior is so important for this group. When you're talking about the stretch of SMU games that they're going to have when it's hot in September, Florida State in Dallas, they're going to go up to Louisville. It'll still be hot there the first weekend of October, I bet. That's going to help them overall. And then Kevin Allen is at this point, going to be backup reserve type. And we'll see how he goes this fall, just as far as his continued development. When it comes to the linebacker room for SMU, this is a group that is really, really exciting. And last year, Kobe Wilson did a postseason event with me, and he said people were sleeping on the linebackers last year. And I raised my hand. I said, oh, yeah, it might have been me. And you look at it now compared to last year, and again, everything is relative to stepping up into this ACC. The linebackers for SMU are all seasoned now with Ahmad Walker and Kobe Wilson. I didn't learn anything about them in fall camp I didn't already know. They're physical. They're smart football players. They have a chip on their shoulder. They practice like they should. And the same goes for Alex Kilgore, who I still think is a freak, still think is going to be one of the best linebackers to come out of SMU in the last couple decades when it's all said and done. The question I still have of this group after fall camp is, who are the starters out of those three? And then, because of how good Brandon Booker has been as a true freshman and being able to make plays, he's on the skinnier side still. He's not big like Kobe or Ahmad or Brandon Maizono, but does he factor in? Because he has a knack for being around the ball and making big plays. And then Brandon Maizono has done a lot in his own right. And I mean, he is a guy that has a lot of physicality and edge to him, which Scott Simons loves in a defensive player. How does this pecking order all shake out? And by the way, Justin Medlock has had some really good fall camp moments, and Zach Smith is a true freshman who can very well help SMU on special teams. So they went from having a linebacker room that was, okay, we have DeQuandis Burns back. Quandis ended up moving on and, is going to graduate or whatever. But last year, there was so much question of, well, can Kilgore play a lot? Can Kobe Wilson go from Temple linebacker who played a good bit to being a starter? He did. This year, they have so much more depth and talent. I'm intrigued to see how they use them. When you go to the cornerback room, this is probably one of the most important positions on the team in terms of it's got to get right. And you look at Jahari Rogers, he had a funny quote. He basically needed to focus on academics. He needed to get right off the field, and he did that. And that has allowed him to focus more on football, from what he said, and not worry about what's going on off the field. And that has allowed him to play a lot better in fall camp. He's still somebody I don't know if I necessarily trust just yet, because there have been moments throughout his career at SMU where you haven't been able to see that talented player that I saw in high school and has all the upside and all those things emerge as a kind of a shutdown corner. That's why they moved Brandon Crosley to corner and, made that decision to do that. And so the Brandon Crosley move has been terrific. He's competitive, which when you watch corners, and I evaluate corners as far as who's SMU going after, who's getting out there on the field and things like that, competitiveness is one of the biggest things, and willingness to be physical. And Brandon Crosley has that. I think there's going to be moments where Brandon Crosley might have some struggles in coverage at times, but he's got that competitiveness and that drive to be physical, and that will help him overcome some of those things. I don't know how the move back to corner is going to go for him, but he's been strong in fall camp, and he's been sticky in coverage, which is a good sign, at least for SMU. The guy who has probably changed the narrative the most, though, is Deuce Harmon. In the spring, I would say Ricky Hundley was borderline disappointed with kind of just where he was at. And then he came in this summer with a renewed sense of work ethic and just kind of got his head on straight in a sense. And he's really been impressive in fall camp. So Deuce Harmon now stock back on the rise. The same could be said for Jalen Davis-Robinson and A.J. Davis. Now, these are two players that are both young redshirt sophomores that have a lot of football left to be played. But both have tools that Ricky Hundley likes. Jalen Davis-Robinson has a ton of speed. A.J. Davis is a very good talent at corner. It hasn't come together for them fully yet to grab starting jobs on the field during the season. Jalen Davis-Robinson has a big chance to be a starter. It wouldn't shock me if he is, based on his fall camp. And then you have A.J. Davis, who went from being this true freshman that was playing a little bit down the stretch and was looking like he was going to be a starter as a true sophomore, or I guess a redshirt freshman, and it didn't pan out, and he almost needed to hit the reset. He did. He came back this fall, and I thought has been a lot better in fall camp as well. And then you have the two freshmen, Alex Rogers, who will probably redshirt, needs a weight room. And then Speedy Nettles is kind of the wild card, because physically Speedy is ready to go, and he's going to be able to provide help if SMU needs it. So the cornerback room is going to be one where we're going to have to see it to believe it. And kind of similar to some other positions, you might have to evaluate it in game when the bullets are flying, and they might have to make some decisions on who really is going to be leaned on for that group as the year unfolds. Finally, the safety room. I don't want to spend much time on this. I'll say this. CJ Sanders, if you want a kind of lukewarm take, if you've been out of practice, CJ Sanders might be the best safety on the team. He might be the best back seven player on the team. So Elijah Roberts front, CJ Sanders, with how physical he is, how smart he is, how good he is in coverage. It wouldn't shock me at all if he was the best. Now, the good news for SMU is Ahmad Moses and Jonathan McGill are outstanding. Isaiah Wokobia is outstanding as well, but he's also coming back from a little bit of a hamstring. So I'll be interested to see, once SMU gets to game week, does SMU manage an Isaiah Wokobia like they're going to manage maybe some other guys here and there? And they let CJ, Jonathan, Ahmad Moses roll. And then you have, quite honestly, you have Jaden Milner-Jones, who they think is going to be a stud. Now, I would agree. Saw him in high school, played a lot for Colorado. He's going to be a stud. Abdul Muhammad has made plays all fall camp. He's earned some opportunities in the early season as well. But so is Kyron Chambers. Physically, he looks a lot stronger. He looks a little bit more comfortable. He's been working out after practice. And then you have Jalen Moses, who has had a couple interceptions now in practice, but the true freshman will probably redshirt. So Scott Simons has whittled it down to CJ Sanders, Jonathan McGill, Ahmad Moses, Isaiah Wokobia as the four is what he calls them. And then you're looking for somebody to be able to be plugged in and be trusted on the back end beyond that. So safety room, I'm not worried about. I knew a lot of things. I will say Abdul Muhammad had a great camp. Kyron Chambers had a strong camp. And Jalen Moses looks like another undersized safety that Scott Simons might have hit on. So finally, Colin Rogers will be your kicker. We didn't get to see much of him. Isaac Pearson is going to be your punter. It's kind of been a mixed bag in a sense, watching him at times punt the ball, but when he hits, he can absolutely boom it. Will Benton will be back as your long snapper. He's a SMU legacy there. And then kick returner will probably be Brashard Smith and Roger Daniels. Punt returner probably be Roger Daniels or Jake Bailey back there catching punts for SMU. So didn't learn too much about special teams. I'll be honest with you guys. It's hard to get a read on it. It's during some other key portions of individual drills that we really would almost rather see. But I'll say this. I think with the depth of this team, SMU is going to be able to play some different guys out there on special teams and potentially help the starters stay fresh. But also because they have depth that they trust, they can also maybe play a couple of starters here and there on special teams, because we know at times last year special teams was an adventure, especially in the kick return game, which we think they have figured out. Punt return, kind of same story. They got it figured out now. And we'll see how it goes. Colin Rogers is a veteran now, so you got to feel good, at least on paper, about him. But it's tough to get a read on special teams until the season. So with that, guys, a reminder, reach out to statusjet.com. Use code PonyUpACC for a discount on a round-trip flight. Kept you long enough now, but hope this episode helps you get through the weekend and running your errands, because guess what? It's the last weekend. I think it is. Yeah, it's the last weekend without college football. We're back, baby. It's game week next week, so jump on theponyexpress.com. Talk to a lot of people. Appreciate all you guys who listen to the podcast. If you want to be a part of the message board community with the bullets are flying and the live game updates, jump on theponyexpress.com. So I hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. We'll catch you next time with another edition, and we'll see you at ontheponyexpress.com as well. So thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.